It's the eCommerce Master Plan podcast. Here to help you solve your marketing problems and grow your e-commerce business. Cutting through the hype to bring you inspiration and advice from the e-commerce sector and beyond. Here's your host, Chloe Thomas.
Hello, welcome to our latest podcast. I'm Chloe. It's great, as always it is, to have you out there listening. Did you know we even have a few people listening in Taiwan? So if that's you, hello Taiwan. Now, this November, the White Label World Expo online retail sourcing show comes to London. Very long way from Taiwan if you're going to try and make it over. Flights to be booked. Now, both myself and today's guests are keynote speakers at the event. I got chatting to Mark at LinnAcademy, and what he'll be sharing at White Label World Expo is so interesting, and he's got such an interesting take on it. I thought I'd get him on the show to share some of it with you beforehand. Now, before we get Mark on, please do check out the sponsors. Shipping and mailing from your desk has never been simpler than with SendPro Online from Pitney Bowes. With SendPro Online from Pitney Bowes, it's just click, send and save for as low as $4.99 a month. Schedule package pickups and track shipments from departure to arrival. And for being an eCommerce Masterplan listener, you'll receive a free 30-day trial to get started and a free £10 scale to ensure that you never overpay. Go to pb.com/masterplan to access this special offer for a free 30-day trial plus a free £10 scale to get started. That's pb.com/masterplan to experience shipping made simple with a free trial of SendPro Online from Pitney Bowes. And now to introduce today's guest expert. Mark Adams is the head of Europe at BigCommerce. He's been in the e-commerce world for almost 20 years, mainly working agency side and focused on the technology stack side of things. He's been advising market-leading brands and retailers for years. And today he's going to help all of us understand the 7 principles of building your direct-to-consumer brand online. Hello, Mark.
Hi, Chloe.
How are you doing?
I'm very good. I'm looking forward to today.
Excellent, me too. Look, before we get into the whole D2C side of things, you're one of the not that many people these days in the industry who've been in e-commerce even longer than me, and by quite some many years as well. So how did you end up getting into e-commerce so early on?
I was a sales rep back in the late 90s for a company called Scoot, who were basically a telephone directory that competed against Yellow Pages. And they started selling kind of websites for small businesses. And we started producing these one-page websites back in the late 90s. And then with a couple of friends, I started an agency in 2004 that focused entirely on e-commerce. And back in 2004, it was still early days. We were working with large multinational brands like Sony and Raw Mail and helping them implement and integrate e-commerce solutions for their customers.
Back when it was properly difficult to do.
When it was really difficult, yeah, when you had to build it all, plug it all together, buy 10 different tools to solve that web experience. And it was very, very expensive, and how the world has changed.
Yeah, it's crazy, isn't it? How the way we had to do things like 10 years ago, 10, 15, 20 years ago, now you can just get a plugin or an app, or it just comes out of the box, and we'd spend weeks trying to construct the brief, let alone speaking with suppliers and testing. And it's mind-boggling, really.
It is. And I really think actually that transformation in reality has only happened over the last 5 or 6 years in the e-commerce space, with technologies like BigCommerce and others that are really focused on simplicity and solving the problems for merchants out of the box with really cool tools that are pre-integrated and built for you to trade a store from scratch up to hundreds of millions of dollars or pounds online.
I actually have to say, I think it's one of the most exciting things that's happened in e-commerce in the last 5 years is that shift, because it's not necessarily because of how the technology has changed, but because of the impact it's had on how retailers are thinking about how they go about doing things. And it's something which I found even the most kind of like boots stuck in the mud e-commerce people or retailers that I know are now starting to think quite differently and so much more agilely in the dictionary definition rather than the project management sense of the word. But I think that's just such that's going to have such impact over the next couple of years. It must be very exciting to be at one of the companies that's driving that change.
It is, yes. I hark back to my background where, projects would take 9, 12 months on other technologies. They'd be really complicated. They would cost, hundreds of thousands, if not millions. And I do think, by and large, even for large brands and large retailers, those days rightfully are over. And the kinds of technologies that are available. But we've got to remember that retail is under, pretty serious threat from transformation of industries, from higher costs of labor to business rates to the effect of digital and other competitive threats coming into the market. And I think the days of high spend on technology and long projects, which by the time you've finished, you've kind of redesigned your business plan and your requirements. I'm so grateful that those days are coming to an end.
Yeah, me too. It's good news for the customer too, isn't it, at the end of the day? Because it means they'll actually get usable sites sometime this century.
Indeed.
Okay, let's shift into the world of D2C, because that's obviously another quite new and big mindset shifting side of e-commerce too. It's increasingly being used, but I think some of our listeners probably still haven't quite got their heads around what D2C or direct to consumer is. So Mark, can you explain a little bit about what it is and how it's different to normal, in inverted commas, e-commerce?
Well, this is just as simple as brands selling direct to the consumer via a digital channel. So brands have been selling via retail channels, wholesale channels for a number of years, but rarely do they engage the consumer directly. And I think the challenge for brands is that they need to understand changing consumer behavior, right? And one of the best ways to do that is digitally, because you can learn so much more quickly. And so creating a direct sales channel that a brand can communicate with, learn from, and engage with those consumers is where we're seeing a lot of growth at BigCommerce, certainly.
So it's those businesses who have their own product.
Yes, indeed.
Is the key thing here, and it's leveraging all the right routes to get that in front of the consumer. Okay, so the 7 principles. We're not going to have time to cover all of them today, but do you just want to give us a heads up as to what these 7 principles are, and we'll just leave people a little bit kind of like wanting to find out what the ones we don't have time to talk about are. So they'll definitely come and see you speak at White Label World Expo, and which means they might come along and see me as well.
Cool. Okay, so I've got 6 for you, Chloe, and I'm going to keep one secret for the expo.
Oh, I love it.
Yeah. So my first one is investing in growth, and I think brands, retailers, anybody selling digitally or in any way to consumers, right? They need to buy the right tool and use the right technologies in the right way, and they need to focus their budget and their investment on growing their business, not on managing technology, and investing on revenue generating features and capabilities, and driving top of funnel traffic into the site and conversion rather than the nuts and bolts of e-commerce. So that's really my top tip. I think the second one that is really important, and we just don't see enough of this today, is performance matters. The speed of your website or your app or your mobile experience is absolutely fundamental, because you will convert much better if the site is super fast. Most sites that I see out there today, you take the top 50 retailers, and I've done this and I've run speed checks on their sites, and they are just horrifically slow. Google is saying now for mobile as well that you need to be sub 3 seconds or you're going to start bouncing traffic. I think Google reckon you'll bounce 52% of your traffic off a mobile website if you are over 3 seconds. Well, imagine just the cost of acquisition of that traffic and then you're immediately bouncing it. It's just not
it's just not sustainable, is it?
It just isn't.
It's crazy.
But I think brands and retailers and online sellers are not focused enough on performance. And in every interaction you have with your development agency or your technology provider, you've got to be pushing them to think about speed and performance every single day. The other thing kind of I look at, and want people thinking about is omnichannel. And traditionally omnichannel was what happened in the store and then what happened online. But we've got emerging channels now which are driving exponential growth. Marketplaces are obviously really significant, but the emerging social channels also is where I think in the next few years, brands and retailers are going to see huge growth from. So we'd like to talk about that.
Mm-hmm. So that's our first three, isn't it?
That's number 3.
That's number 3. Cool. Number 4?
Keeping costs under control. So identifying the total cost of ownership of running your online business and the total cost of sales, and keeping tight control and management of those costs, I think is absolutely crucial, because they can run away with you as you're beginning to develop your site and developing new features, and it needs to be sustainable from a cost perspective. I'd like people to think about omni-channel inventory management. So being able to put inventory into those sales channels independently and managing that. It's a complex problem to solve, and technology can go now a long way to alleviating that. And my 6th one is really about content creation and experience. So I'd like brands, especially D2C brands, to think about the content experience they provide and the assets they have to engage their consumers with really cool experiences that will build more loyalty. And I think brands are uniquely placed to be able to do that well and should invest in content creation. And I said the 7th one is a secret.
Excellent. I'm glad you reiterated that just before someone would have missed it the first time around and gone, where's 7? Where's 7? Where's number 7 gone? Okay, 7 is the secret. You're not going to find that one out on this podcast. You're going to have to come along to White Label World Expo to get it. Okay, Mark, the one I want to drill into the first one you mentioned, investing in growth, because I think we mentioned mindset changes earlier, and I think that's a mindset shift, isn't it? It's not I have to spend X on hosting and the basics. It's about putting the money where it's actually going to make a difference. Do you want to expand on that a little bit more?
So, before joining BigCommerce, I spent a lot of time helping retailers, particularly larger retailers, select e-commerce technology and other technologies to help power their digital channels. And, used to assess a lot of technology providers, write RFPs, and then evaluate those and evaluate the whole costs of that solution. What we always used to see was such huge costs in acquiring the licenses for technology, hosting, then application support, upgrading those solutions on a regular basis. And so typically you would have, say, at least 70 to 80% of the budget on a yearly basis going into those things which are just keeping the lights on effectively, and around 20% of the budget into doing cool stuff on the front end of the website, or creating new revenue generating features, or driving top of funnel traffic into the website, or features that focused on improving conversion. And I think the model needs to be completely flipped, where you're spending 80% of your budget on those types of activities and really only 20% on kind of keeping the lights on, the licensing, the hosting, the support, and kind of core development activities. BigCommerce is certainly at the forefront of helping retailers and merchants do just that.
And it certainly strikes me that it's in this day and age when you can reduce those keeping the lights on costs. I like that phrase for it. The keeping the lights on costs by so much, it means you have that flexibility to work out what's the biggest problem at the moment. How do we solve it? Is it about changing things on the website, or actually should some of that budget be reinvested in content creation, in speeding up the website, or in even the marketing side of things, or even potentially new product? But to have such a large chunk, just you get to the 1st of January and 80% of your web budget is committed, and you've just achieved what you achieved the previous year is quite depressing.
It is, and you're not going to move the needle with that 20%, are you, in building for growth, building growth?
You're not going to keep up with the competition either, or the customer expectations.
Well, this is it. I mean, if we look at, half of all e-com transactions happen on Amazon, whether in the US or pretty much here in Europe. Amazon are releasing new features and capabilities dozens of times a day. That's what retailers are competing with. They've got huge budgets and sophisticated IT capabilities, and they're innovating constantly. and that's the core competition. I think merchants need to be able to use that budget effectively to grow and invest in building their business, in building sales, in converting better, in going into new channels, and going international, and doing all the things that are really going to move the needle on growth.
And obviously you're merging into your second point here, which I think is equally important. I think quite tied into this is often if people are on those legacy systems where 80% of your budget is on keeping the lights on, often those systems, whatever you do to try and increase speed, you're only playing around with the position of the cherry on top of the cream, on top of the ice cream, on top of the cake, because fundamentally speed improvements come from the bottom up. The big step changes in speed improvement mean being on the right platform in the first place.
They do, but also pushing that problem to your vendor, right? So that you're not having to manage all of that yourself. Because it is difficult, let's face it, when you're building your site, your development, whether you're doing it internally or whether you're doing it through an agency or wherever, they're not always thinking about performance and testing everything against how fast something is. They're just worried about, integrating that app or that back-end system or creating that front end of the website. You need to be able to manage that as a retailer, as a merchant, and get everyone focused on that. But it's difficult because it's actually hard to do. And so that's why I think with SaaS technologies, where the standard front end experience is being optimized purely for super fast performance, sub 2 seconds is really what we're aiming for here to the browser, so that the user is seeing on that website or in that app, I think is absolutely critical. I was being demoed by one of our partners recently, a PWA site that had been integrated to BigCommerce. And I'm not kidding. Literally, as you touch the screen, the page loaded instantaneously, literally as you touched it. And I was like, wow, this is the future. And these are the kinds of things that merchants and brands and retailers need to be focused on delivering, is this super fast performance.
I'm glad you mentioned PWA, because I think that's such an exciting area that I'm surprised more retailers haven't jumped on. Because in our world of blogging, it's been around for a year or so, but retailers seem to be quite slow on the uptake. So do you first of all just want to explain what PWA is for the listener out there who's going, what are we talking about? And then a little bit more about it?
In its simplest form, it's just a highly optimized mobile experience, kind of mobile first experience that is built for performance. So what we want to begin to do actually is begin to separate that front end presentation layer from the e-commerce engine in the back end. We talk a lot about headless, for example. So being able to architect and deliver solutions that are not completely tied together. So you're using a different front end technology that your e-commerce platform comes often out of the box with. And I think to the point here, this is one of the issues, is that a lot of e-commerce technologies of yesteryear tightly couple that presentation layer into the logic in the e-commerce platform, which means it's then difficult for developers to separate that out and to develop quick performant websites. And using PWA as one of the methods to kind of develop particularly mobile experiences is a solution to solving that.
I couldn't agree more. And it's anyone who wants to know the letters, PWA is progressive web apps, like having a mobile app that works in a browser that doesn't require someone to download. So it's kind of like the best of all the worlds. And anyone now who's doing a site rebuild, if your mobile bit isn't being taken care of by a PWA, I can't think of a good reason for that happening, Mark. Can you?
Not unless you've got some other investment in kind of a content management technology stack that, if you're a larger brand, that you might do that where they've not yet caught up, where you technically can't. And this is one of the things that we talk about, the API connectivity and being able to easily build front-end experiences no matter what technology stack that might be, or front-end framework or content management system. And so that this plays into, a more agile technology stack that allows you to build those experiences however you want, in whatever tools you want, in an efficient way.
And I suppose, talking the headless idea where you've got these great systems in the back end that enable you to make the front end as user-friendly as possible with whatever tech it might be. In that scenario, if you're one of these brands with lots of content and a big CMS system, if you've got a CMS system that can be headless and you've got an e-commerce system that can be headless, then you can create whatever mashup of information from different sources gives your customers the best possible experience wherever they are and however they're accessing.
Yeah, indeed. I mean, if you think, let's say you're a brand that's got a big investment in a whole bunch of different brand websites on a particular content management technology, and you just want to commerce enable those sites rather than rebuild them all on your e-commerce platform, which is going to be time consuming and expensive, requires lots of new skills potentially that you're going to have to embed in the team. If you can just connect via the API to that e-commerce service, that add to basket, that checkout flow, and other services very easily within your existing front end, then you can solve that problem for a fraction of the cost, much quicker, while still keeping the same tools within the business that you've already been using and your organization, your team, and the people know how to use.
E-commerce Master Plan is supported by some of the greatest companies in the e-commerce sector. Here's a reminder of who they are.
With SendPro Online from Pitney Bowes, you can weigh, print, send and save without stepping foot into the post office. Starting at $4.99 per month, you can also save up to 5 cents on every letter and up to 40% off USPS priority mail. Calculate exact postage online and print directly from your PC. Go to pb.com/masterplan to access a special offer for a free 30-day trial plus a free £10 scale to get started. That's pb.com/masterplan to experience shipping made simple with a free trial of SendPro Online from Pitney Bowes.
It's time for the top tips round.
Mark, we've just taken apart the world of D2C. We even ended up talking about the world of headless, but now we're going to get into the top tips whilst our listeners' heads spin about the potential of what we've just been talking about. But let's give them some more really quick ideas for taking their businesses to the next level. So, Mark, first up, the book top tip. If everyone listening to this podcast agreed to take Friday off and read a book to make their business better, which book would you recommend?
I've just finished reading a book called Measure What Matters by John Doerr. John Doerr is a leading VC in the US and has been advising companies as wide as Google and others. And their fundamental business growth has been built off this concept of OKRs, which are objectives and goal setting and key results. And it's been really interesting reading this because I'm kind of thinking about how I implement this BigCommerce in Europe. And what I really want to do is get the team thinking about what our stretch objective is. We want to go and build the company out in Europe. We want to do it really quickly, but we want to do it efficiently. And so we've got this grand plan, but that grand plan sounds too far away. So we need to start breaking it down into measurable results that will allow us to track to that long-term goal. And so if we can align everyone in the team around that wider objective, that kind of moonshot that we're looking to land at some point in 2 or 3 years, and break it down bit by bit and have everyone in the team focused on driving results that they're responsible for to that goal, then you can do amazing things. And this is how Google, 10x revenue, for example, and lots of other companies have been using, certainly in the Valley for a while, these the concept of OKRs. Really interesting book.
And it's certainly something I find a lot of e-commerce businesses struggling with. When I go into, to have a review with them or something, and they've got pages and pages of weekly and monthly reporting that half the team spends the whole of Monday or the whole of the first day of the month creating, and they only look at for 5 minutes. And if 2 days later you said to them, right, how are we doing against the key objective? They go, I don't know what the key objective is. I think drilling it down to we care about this number is just such a powerful thing. And any book that can help people do that is high on my list of things that need to be read.
Yeah, and you can actually, there's some really great content on YouTube and videos from various people on OKRs. So you don't actually need to read the whole book, although I definitely recommend it. You can find some great content out there on this on YouTube and Google.
Excellent. Okay, the traffic top tip. Which marketing method do you either prize above all others or think doesn't get the press it deserves?
Doesn't get the press it deserves, I think, social. So already, if we look at our merchant base at BigCommerce, round about 4% of the revenue our customers are generating, they're generating it on and via social and social commerce. So Instagram, Facebook fundamentally, but also emerging platforms like TikTok. And I think if you look at certain demographics, like the 16 to 24-year-old demographic, that is actually where those people are browsing and wanting to purchase on today. So depending on the brand and depending on your target market, I think social commerce is going to be one of the main evolving channels that we need to be thinking about and investing in. And actually purchasing via those channels as well. So, not even sending the user back to your website, but actually allowing them to check out on Instagram or TikTok and buy that product there.
Excellent tip. Okay, the tool top tip. Maybe a collaboration tool, a social media plugin, a phone app, or just a way of working. Is there a cool little tool you use that makes you and your team more efficient from day to day?
We use Slack an awful lot in the office, and I like Slack because you get a history of every conversation you've had. When I was in my previous life, when we were working with on projects, kind of trying to help retailers manage complex e-commerce projects, and we were communicating with agencies and other third parties, having a Slack channel dedicated for that project, and then being able to review the history and what people have committed to, rather than doing it in email or rather than doing it over the phone, was certainly something I embraced, and we use it heavily here at BC.
It is a great way of keeping track of the status of things and what has been agreed, hasn't been agreed, without endless spreadsheets having to come into the mix as well. I love the fact it combines both that the informal part of the chat with the formal part of actually managing the project. It's a very, very clever tool. Okay, the growth top tip. If you met someone today who's focused on growing their e-commerce business from 100 orders per month to 1,000, what would be your number one tip for them?
Without a shadow of a doubt, is hire early. You can buy in these skills much more cost efficiently than you could ever do trying to learn it all yourself, which will slow you down, slow growth down. Go and hire someone that's going to be way better at doing that specific thing, whether it's managing the website or looking after inventory or whatever it is. But hire as early in the cycle as possible, and bring in specialists to help you build the business. You can't do it all by yourself.
Would you expand that to be not necessarily FTE, as in full-time employee, but freelancers, agencies, whoever is the right solution? Is that what we're talking about here?
Yeah. It's not necessarily a full-time person within your team. There are lots of ways you can solve that problem, using freelancers, using agencies to do part of it. I do believe, though, that building a skill set internally in the organization is really important. And the more skills and ownership you have over being able to manage and trade and change things on your web platform is useful. But you don't need to do all that on day one. You can use different ways of achieving that over time.
Excellent advice. Okay, Mark, before we say goodbye, could you please let the listeners know where they can find you and BigCommerce on the web and social media, please?
For me, certainly LinkedIn is a tool I use an awful lot and communicate with people via. For BC, we're based near Bank in London. Partners, particularly tech partners and agency partners, we welcome you down to the office. Obviously, the website is www.bigcommerce.com, or you can email me at mark.adams@bigcommerce.com.
Excellent. Thank you. Well, Mark, thanks so much for being on the show today. It's been great diving into the world of D2C and tech stacks and headless and PWAs. I think we've covered a lot today. So thank you so much for coming on and sharing so much with us. It's greatly appreciated.
Thank you, Chloe. Thanks for having me.
We covered a lot of ground there in the world of D2C and just generally in the world of getting your website and your tech stack platforms to work for you. We talked about D2C, so direct to consumer, which is when you're selling your own products to the consumer via whatever channels work. Then we talked about a little bit about PWAs, those progressive web apps, which are a very clever way of creating fast, user-friendly easy to create, actually, a mobile online experiences. So to the consumer, they look like websites, but they're built in a very different way. And then we also talked a little bit about headless, which is where you have the right back end and in a way that enables you to create the front end in pretty much any way you want. We covered a lot there, lots of advice, lots of tips, and some great top tips too. Now, if you want to catch that mystery number 7 principle and more on this, then do make sure you check out Mark's session at the White Label World Expo show that's happening in London on the 27th and 28th of November. You can get yourself a free ticket for that at whitelabelexpo.co.uk. If you come along, please do make sure you catch up my session too, because I'm going to be sharing some lessons from my brand new book, E-commerce Marketing, How to Get Traffic That Buys to Your Website. To get your hands on the notes from today's show, including the top tips, links, and details of related episodes, then head over to ecommercemasterplan.com/podcast. If you'd like to find out more about my book, head to ecommercemarketingbook.com. And if you're listening, final request from me, I promise, if you're listening via Apple Podcast or iTunes, then please do give us some feedback via the review app. I love reading your reviews. I love hearing what you think about the show and finding ways in which I can make it better. Now, I hope you have a great week and keep optimizing.
Thank you for listening to the E-commerce Master Plan podcast. Find out more at ecommercemasterplan.com/podcast.